Welcome back, students. In this video, I will be solving the test that we had on algebra for Math 262 on October 11th. So I will be writing the questions and then solving it. So the first question was simplify the fractions. So the first fraction that we had was 583x minus a7 x3 divided by 25 a squared x. So here, what I want from you guys to know that you can factorize the common factor here, okay? Because you have a and x repeating in both of the terms in the numerator and then in the denominator as well. But you cannot simplify each variable at this shape. You have to first factorize it. So here I can factorize a3 because both of them have got a3, okay? And then the lowest power I would consider for x is 1. So if I factorize this one, okay, from the first term I would have 5, and from the second term I would have a4 x2, right? And from the denominator, there's nothing that I can do. So the next step is just simplification, right? Here that you actually factorize the numerator, then you can go ahead and cancel out. So here, a to the power 2 will be simplified. So a to the power 3 means a is multiplied by itself 3 times, okay? So 2 of these will be cancelled with the a squared in the denominator. This x will be cancelled out with this one, and I think there's nothing else we can factorize, so that would be a and 5 minus a4 x squared by 25. That is the final answer. Okay, this is the second question. So I will start by factorizing the common factor. So definitely 3. And then I would go by factorizing x to the power m. Okay, just as a side note, I put it in a different color. So when we have x to the power m minus 1, okay, that is actually x to the power m multiplied x to the power negative 1. Okay, when we have the same base, different exponent, the exponent will be added together. If we want to simplify it further, or another way of showing it, that would be x to the power m, x to the power negative 1, it's 1 over x. Okay, so it's just a side note for your reference. So here, if I factorize 3 to the power 3x to the power m, what is left from the first term, we would have 6x to the power negative 1. From the second term, I would have negative 3x to the power 3. And the bottom one would be 3x to the power m. You don't have to do that for the bottom one, but I'm just going to break it into 2 terms because canceling out would be much easier. 2x negative 4. So here, what you can do, this will cancel out and see what is left. Here we're dealing with a combination of positive and negative exponent, so we cannot leave it like this. We have to continue simplification. So 6 times x to the power negative 1, it's 6 to the power x, negative 3 times x to the power 3, the denominator would be 1, and then here it will be divided by 2x4. Okay, so what I can do here, you can either do common denominator, or I personally prefer to use multiplication, and I will multiply both the numerator and denominator by the biggest power. So here I will multiply x4, x4. So if I multiply the numerator by x4, let's see what I will have. I will have 6. x4 and x will be simplified, 6x3, and here I would have negative 3x to the power 7. Okay, and then here I would have 2. Or if you don't like to multiply it by this, you can easily go and do common denominator and then simplify it. I will show you how to do the other method as well, because this will be so helpful. So let me use another color maybe. Okay, so here we have to do common denominator here, right? So by doing common denominator, I have x, right? So 6x, and here it turns into 3x4, right? And this guy wouldn't change. But if you remember, as I just mentioned in the class, when we have a over b, when we have two fractions divided by one another, okay, this is how you go around and solve it. You write down the first fraction, then this fraction line will change into multiplication, and the second fraction in the denominator would be flipped. So that would be d over c. So the final answer would be a times d by b times c. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do here exactly. So I did the numerator here. I changed it into this one. Okay, now this fraction line, I'm going to change it to multiplication. Then the equation in the denominator would be flipped. So that would be x4 to the power over 2, sorry. Okay, power 2. x4 over 2. So here, this one can be simplified with this. So the final answer would be, there is nothing else we can simplify. So the very final answer would be 6 minus 3x4, right? Because this x3 is will be multiplied by this. So we can either, let's say, put it like this, divided by 2 by x3, or we can just multiply it and say the final answer is 6x cubed minus 3x7. Whatever method you use, as long as you get to the final answer, would be fine with me. Question number 2 is expand and collect the like terms. So here, what you need to do first you have to start with this bracket, raise it to the power 2, and then multiply the answer by this one. Okay, so here I will just consider the bracket. This is identity number 1, if you remember. So the answer would be first term to the power 2 minus 2 times a times b. So that would be negative 12x plus 4. But remember, we have this guy sitting here. So now the next step would be doing FOIL, right? So this is in front of the parentheses, so or bracket, so it will be multiplied by each of these terms, right? So let's do it together. negative 5 times 9, negative 45, x to the power 6. So that would be 60 x to the power 5 minus 20 x to the power 4. And that is the final answer. Let's do next question. Here again, the question is asking you to expand and collect like terms. So you have two terms in the first bracket. You have to multiply each of these terms by all terms in the second bracket. So you have three terms here, and then you will have another three terms from negative 3. Okay, let's do it together. So I will use different colors so you would know which terms are coming from 4x and which terms are coming from the negative 3. Okay, so we start by 4x. 4x multiplied by 16x2. 4 times 16, it's 64x3 plus 48x2 plus 36x. Three terms from here. Then I would have another three terms. So negative 3 multiplied by each of these. So that would be negative 3. So that would be negative 48x squared, negative 36x, then negative 27. And then the next step would be just collecting like terms. Okay, so x to the power 3. There is nothing with power 3, but power 2, this will cancel out with this one. Now, continuing with cancellation, plus 36 would be cancelled out with negative 36, and what is left is negative 27. Okay, moving on to the next question. We are giving this fraction, and it's the question is simplify. In order to simplify, we have to deal with a numerator first and then denominator, and then start by finding the common factor and canceling out everything. Okay, so let's see. So here, I start with considering the numerator, and I write the numerator here, 6x squared plus 13x minus 5. And remember, I want to make it into two brackets. Here, this term, the coefficient is 5, so it is not a perfect square, but remember, even if it's not, I can manipulate it and times the whole thing by 6, and then after that I will divide everything by 6. Okay, so if I multiply everything by 6, this will turn into 36x squared plus 6 times 13x minus 30, right? So here, then you have a perfect square term. So you can break it out into two brackets, 6x and 6x. Then you're looking for two numbers, which you add them, you get 13. You multiply them, you get 30. The reason why, because here the sum of m plus n multiplied by the non-repeating factor is 78, and repeating factor is 6. So 78 by 6 is 13. So the two numbers, so the product would be negative 30. So the 2 would be negative negative, so it would be 15 and negative 2. You can see that if we add them, we get 13. If we multiply them, we get negative 6. Okay, now let's not forget that we have to divide it by 6. Okay, so if I want to divide it by 6, right, this side should be also divided by 6. I can consider 6 as 2 multiplied by 3. So here I will factorize a 3, so it would be 2x plus 5. And here I will factorize a 2, it would be 3x minus 1. Okay, and now these 2 will be cancelled out with this 3 cancel out with this one, and then the final answer would be 2x plus 5, and then 3x minus 1. Okay, and let's deal with the whole fraction. So instead of the numerator, I will substitute it with the 2 brackets that I calculated, which are 2x plus 5. You can see it here, 2x plus 5 multiplied by 3x minus 1, and then the denominator, let me tilt it. Okay, the denominator, if you look closely, it's the difference of the squares. So that would be 2x plus 5, and then 2x minus 5. Now you have 2 brackets with the multiplication in between, another 2 brackets in the denominator. So the next step would be finding the common brackets and canceling out. I guess this one can be canceled out with this one, and the final answer would be 3x minus 1 over 2x minus 5. This is the final answer. You cannot go any further, and this is the most simple form you can get. Moving on to question 5, it's asking you to simplify again. So for some of you who are not very familiar with exponent, it might be a little bit challenging. Although we discussed about it in the class before, and you were supposed to have some basic understanding of algebra. So with your basic knowledge of algebra, you should be able to solve this. But anyhow, let's do it together. Just as a reminder, on the side, let me tell you, if this is how we deal with negative exponent. So x to the power negative 2 is 1 over the same thing with a positive power. Okay, this is what I want to do. So here 4 minus 1 x to the power 2 and 2 minus 1 over x. Okay, this is what I do. So I do common denominator here. Common denominator is x squared. That would be 4x squared minus 1. Here I have 2x minus 1 over x. Now what I have to do, remember I have 2 fractions. So I write down the first fraction, and then I will flip the other one. So that would be 4x squared minus 1 x squared multiplied by this guy. This will be simplified with this, but remember this guy here, I can break it up into 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1, and I have 2x minus 1 here. So I can cancel out these two. The final answer is 2x plus 1. Okay, the part B of question 5, it says again simplify. So what I'm going to do here, remember I have one fraction in the numerator and one fraction in the denominator. So I'll do exactly the same thing. I do common denominator, then I will simplification. So I will just write down the first fraction, then this fraction line will be turned into a multiplication line, then I have 2x, x minus 3. Okay, now this would be simplified with this, but instead of 9 minus x squared, I'm going to use one of the identities and write it as x minus x plus 3 and 3 minus x, which is exactly the same as this one. Okay, and then we have x minus 3 in the denominator. Okay, if you compare these two together, they are very similar. The only difference is that if you factorize a negative sign from this bracket, okay, we are factorizing a negative sign so that we could cancel out. So it would be x minus 3, and then in the denominator I have x minus 3. So these two will cancel out, and what is left? It would be negative x plus 3. Okay, this is the final answer. Now, for question 6, 7, and 8, it's basically you have to use your knowledge. Well, actually, for question 6 and 7, when it's asking you to solve for a particular variable, you have to use your common algebra knowledge. Like, what I mean is, you have to use common denominator, cross multiplication, simplification, identities, and try to make it as simple as possible. Okay, so for question 6, it is asking you to solve for t. What we have to do, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3 fractions, right? What I can do, I can consider these two together because they have the same denominator and it's 8. I can add it up, I can add these two together to make it a little bit more simpler. So that would be t, okay, and negative 3, and then I have a negative 3 here, so that would be t negative 6. And on this side, I have 3t multiplied by 5. If I want to write it a little bit more simpler, that would be t minus 6 over 3t divided by 5. And here, remember, you can use cross multiplication to make it linear. So from here, you could easily say 8 times 3t equals 5 times t minus 6. All right? So from here, you could just say 24t is equal to 5t minus 30. It's a linear equation. So I will bring this 5 to this side. That would be negative 5, 19t equals 30, negative 30 actually. So t would be negative 30 over 19. Okay, so for this question and the next one, they're asking you to solve for a particular variable. For these type of question, you're supposed to use your basic knowledge of algebra. Like, you have to do common denominator to make it simple, then maybe use cross multiplication to make it linear, and then you can decide what else is needed. So here I have t minus 3 over 4 minus 3 over 8 equal to 3t minus 5. So what I can do, I can start from this side, do a common denominator, which is 8, and then make these two into one fraction. So by doing so, that would be 2t minus 6, and I have a negative 3 here, okay? So then I have 3t equal to 5, okay? Let's make it simple. Add the like terms. That would be 2t minus 9 divided by 8 equals to 3t divided by 5. Here, remember, you have one fraction this side, one fraction this side. So the most important and the most easy method to use would be using a common denominator. Another method would be moving this fraction to this side and doing common denominator, which I really do not recommend, just because, when you're doing cross multiplication, you might be able to cancel the common factors and make it more simpler. So that would be 8 times 3t, which is 24t, Then I have 5 multiplied by this, which is 10t minus 45. And now 10t will move to the other side. I will have 14t equals to negative 45. T would be negative 45 divided by 14. And this is the final answer. So remember, you can always go back, substitute the value of t, and make sure it satisfies the original equation. Okay, this is the other question. They're asking you to solve for Q1. If you look at this question, you might be terrified because you are not used to seeing like four or five different variables. But remember, when they're asking for a particular variable, treat that variable as a variable and look at the rest of the variables as a constant. Okay? Treat them as a constant. So here, Q1 is the variable, is the main one. I treat the rest as a constant. Okay. So again, what I will do here, let me take a look at here. So what I will do, I will start by doing correct cross multiplication. Okay. So that would be d, small d, multiplied by f plus q1 equals by capital D Q2 minus Q1. Okay, now you have to do FOIL. Okay, so that would be small df dq1, which small d here is actually plays the role of a coefficient, equal dq2 minus dq1. Again, capital letter D here plays the role of a coefficient. Remember, the q1, it's your variable. So you have to move all your variable to one side, the constant to the other side. So you would have dq1 plus capital dq1, then you have dq2, and then df would be moved to the other side, right? Now what you can do, you can factorize q1. You would have small d, capital D, then you have dq2 minus df. So we want to write right? So there this expression in a way that q1, which is the main variable, have the coefficient of 1. So we divide both sides by d plus capital D. So we get q1. This is how you can get the answer. Then d plus d's cancel out, and this is the final answer. Okay, next question. This is a rational expression. Rational, first of all, means it's consisted of one or a few fractions in algebra, right? So we have one or few fractions, and it's a combination of fractions and algebra. Here you have two fractions on one side and then another fraction on the other side. How you can proceed is by maybe one way would be by doing common denominator on the left side and doing factorization maybe on the denominator. It depends. So I start by factorizing the denominator. So I pull 3x. So what is left would be x minus 1. Now, because this seems like a big denominator, that's why I started by doing pulling out the 3x. Now, what I will see is that 3x and x minus 1 is repeating in the denominator of the other side. So I'll do common denominator in the left side. the common denominator would be exactly the same, 3x multiplied by x minus 1. Now I have to simplify. As you can see, the denominator of both fractions are the same. Let me tell you something. When we have two fractions, let's say two fractions which have the same, exactly the same denominator, and when they have the same denominator, the numerator of the two fractions must be exactly the same. So that means the black circle must be exactly the same to the blue circle. Okay, so this, I want to apply this fact to the above fraction. So here, as the two fractions have got the same denominator, I will consider only the numerator. So I start by simplifying. I have 1x minus 12x, which I add them together, that would be minus 11x. Then I have negative 1. On the other side, I would have 32. So once more, when the denominators are the same, the two numerator must be exactly the same. Okay, so the answer equals to 32. And now I move negative 1 to the other side. That would be positive 1 plus 32. It would turn into 33. So the x would be plus 33 divided by negative 11. The final answer is negative 3. Okay, now one more thing that I have to tell you about the fractions. Remember I told you before in the previous lessons that the denominator of a fraction can never be 0. Therefore, whenever we are dealing with fractions on an algebra, we have to make sure that we exclude the values that make the denominator as 0. Okay, so take a look at here. The denominator is 3x multiplied by x minus 1. We have to make sure this one is not equal to 0. That means 3x should never be 0. X minus 1 shouldn't be 0. So the values which make this expression 0 should be excluded. What makes 3x 0? It's 0. And what makes x minus 1 as a 0? It's x 1. So these two values, I mean 0 and 1, are called non-permissible values, or values which are not possible, because these values make the denominator of your fraction 0. So moving to the next question, here I have this expression again, and I'm asked to rewrite it as a0 to be the main variable. So I start, as usual, I start by moving the 1 over a0 to the other side, doing common denominator. That's what I did. Now, one fraction on this side, one fraction on the other side. I do cross multiplication. Okay. After cross multiplication, we would have a linear expression. Okay, let me just do calculations. Now, okay, here a t. Now remember, our main variable is a0. So I will underline all the terms which have a0 and pull them to one side. Okay, so I move all the variables, all the terms with a0 to one side and leave the rest to the other side. Then again, I factorize a0. What is left? equals AT. Now remember again, we want to make sure that the coefficient of the main variable, or A0, is 1. So we divide both sides by the coefficient of A0, and the final answer would be A0 equals to AT divided by 1 minus KT AT. Okay, so here A0 and okay, so let me explain something here. I know like this uh, term, these few terms which I encircled in green were a bit weird, but they were actually the coefficient of A0. Okay, moving to the next question here. I have a similar question, but this time it's asking me to write in terms of C3. So I start the same thing, uh, moving one of the fraction to the other side, doing a common denominator. Now I have one fraction on this side, one fraction on the other side. Perfect. Now I do cross multiplication, as you can see in the blue. Remember, this is one of the most important tools you can use in algebra. But remember the condition that you have to use: one fraction on this side, one fraction on the other side. So now you can start by multiplying these two together. The good thing about cross multiplication is that most of the time after doing cross multiplication, you might be able to cancel out the common factors. Here it seems there are no common factors, so we will start by FOIL or multiplication. All the terms in the first bracket will be multiplied by all the terms in the second bracket. So I show it with blue and orange. Okay, now I'm for terms. Now the main variable is C3. So I just underline the terms which has C3 in them. I keep them on one side and I move the rest to the other side. C3, okay, this is it. Now remember, at the end, we want the coefficient of C3 to be 1. So everything will be divided by the coefficient of C3. Okay. Now dividing by the coefficient, canceling out. So I can rewrite the final answer. C2 minus C1 C2 plus C1 C divided by C2 minus C, and I think there is nothing we can simplify. That is the final answer. Moving on to the next question. Okay, so here let me write down the question. Okay, 1 over 2x minus 4 plus 1 over 10 equals to 2 divided by 5x squared minus 10x. Now I have to solve this. What I can do here, I will first take a look at it, see if you can see any repeating pattern or terms. Okay, so what I suggest, let's start by factorizing the denominator. So 5x is pulled out. What is left? X minus 2. Now on the other side, what I will do, I pull out 2. What is left? X minus 2. So you can see that x minus 2 is repeating. So I just do common denominator. Okay, so the common denominator would be 2x minus 2, and then coming from the first fraction, and 10 coming from the second fraction. So that would be 10 plus 2x minus 4. On the other side, I have 2 over 5x, x minus 2. So you can see the pattern again. I have one fraction on one side, another fraction on the other side of the equal sign. What you can do here, exactly, cross multiplication. So 2x plus 6 multiplied by 5x, that multiplied by x minus 2 equals, now 2 times 10, 20, times 2, 40, x minus 2, perfect. So here what I can do, I can divide both sides by x minus 2 and get rid of this factor to make it a little bit more simpler. 5 and 40, so that would be 8. So what is left on this side? I have 8 on this side. I'll start by multiplying whatever is left. Okay, then x equals to 8. Now I have 2x squared plus 6x plus, so I will move 8 to the plus equals 8. Now what I can do, because you can see that you can pull out a 2, right? And divide both sides by 2 to make it a little bit more simpler. So the final answer is x squared 3x. I moved the 4 to the other side, 0. So the answer, I'm looking for two numbers, add them, I get 3, multiply them, I get negative 3. So that would be, x is the repeating factor. So these two numbers, 4 and negative 1, and then it should be equal to 0. So one of the answers, if two brackets are multiplied together and the answer is 0, either of the brackets could be 0. So I get two answers. X is either negative 4 or x is 1.